Welcome back. Well, today is tax day, April 15th. Get your tax returns in. New polling from the Cato Institute finds that more than half of Americans say taxes are just too high, with most worried that they can't afford even higher taxes potentially next year. But Congress's budget reconciliation plan is popular. 75% say they want lawmakers to make the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act permanent, while 64% want to cut spending and balance the budget. Joining me now with where lawmakers are is Wisconsin Congressman Tom Tiffany. Congressman, good to see you. Thanks so much for being here. Big victory before you all left for the Easter recess in passing the budget resolution. What happens when you come back?
Yeah, that was a good week last week, including passing that budget resolution. So we have our staffs working busily as we speak to create this budget reconciliation bill. But now the heavy lifting starts. Now we start negotiating between the House and the Senate what we're going to put in there. And we absolutely have to make the tax cuts permanent. But I think we also, the big debate last week, if you remember, Maria, was about how much we're going to reduce in spending. The Senate sent our resolution back to us saying only $4 billion. That's why some of us held out last Wednesday. We want to see greater spending cuts, and that's what needs to happen. We need to have greater spending savings for the American taxpayer. So
in order to pay for the new ideas which President Trump brought to the table, which is no tax on tips and no tax on Social Security, the idea was raised to raise taxes on the rich. And I asked your colleague, Chairman of Freedom Caucus, Andy Harris, about it last week. Here he is. Watch.
But if we can't get enough spending reductions, we're going to have to pay for our tax cuts, again, to make sure that we don't go down the road of fiscal deterioration on this. That's one possibility.
Tell me about this 40% tax bracket.
Before the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the highest bracket was 39.6,
yes,
and it was less than $1 million. Ideally, what we could do, again, if we can't find spending reductions, is say, okay, let's restore that higher bracket. Let's set it at maybe $2 million income and above to help pay for the rest of the president's agenda, which is, of course, no tax on tips and potentially other tax cuts.
Where are you on that, Congressman?
I'm not a big fan of tax increases on anybody. But I think, the Department of Government Efficiency has identified plenty of savings. There is plenty of room to find the savings out there, as has been identified over the last couple months. And that's part of the reason in the polling that you're showing there, Maria, it shows, what is it? Almost 2/3 of Americans are saying we can reduce spending. They've seen the news stories about DOGE and what they are doing. There's plenty of room to get those savings.
All right. And we also asked Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, about it, and he was with me on Sunday. Here's his answer to that. The idea that you can have a new tax bracket of 40% for the highest earners, are you seriously considering that?
Well, I'm not a big fan of doing that. I mean, we're the Republican Party, and we're for tax reduction for everyone. So, I mean, that's a general principle that we always try to abide by. There's lots of discussion, lots of ideas on the Hill. People have different thoughts and theories on how we can solve this perfect equation to get all of this done. But I wouldn't put any money on any of that yet.
All right, so you are in alignment. Sounds like the White House, it sounds like the leadership in the House does not want that. But I want to get your take on where the offsets are then, because you're going to need full agreement here within the Republicans. You can't afford too many nays. So where do the cuts come from to pay for the tax cuts on the lowest earners?
I think it's in a variety of programs, but it starts with waste, fraud, and abuse, and you take some of the stuff that DOGE has identified. I mean, for example, the Wall Street Journal just reported a couple weeks ago that there's $200 billion that was given out in duplicate payments in the Medicaid program. Americans don't want that type of waste going on. That's just one small example of ways in which we can do it. I also believe there should be work requirements, and work requirements will get us some savings in some of the welfare programs.
Okay. Meanwhile, the White House is asking Congress to claw back more than $9 billion in previously approved funding. Some of this funding is incredible to me, Congressman. Some of the rescinding requests include more than $1 billion for NPR and PBS. $1 billion that taxpayers give PBS and NPR, $6 million for net zero cities in Mexico, $3 million for Iraqi Sesame Street, $1 million for voter ID in Haiti. $750,000 spent on reducing xenophobia in Venezuela and $8,000 for promoting vegan food in Zambia. I'd love to know how all of this got passed in the first place.
How about $5,600 for watering 8 plants in a Department of Defense facility? You know, I believe Senator Johnson from Wisconsin, my home state, has a very good idea. He says, let's go through this line by line. When he talks about going back to pre-pandemic spending, then increases for inflation, Social Security, and Medicare, I think that's a really good approach. And we need to go through the budget line by line, and we can root that stuff out.
Okay. Emily, jump in here.
Congressman, I just want to follow up here because obviously it's great to see a rescissions package coming from the White House, but at $9 billion, we are way shy of the numbers we need to really offset the extension of TCJA. And you say going through the budget line by line, but most of this isn't approved by Congress. It's discretion given away by Congress to the agencies. So what are you going to do to try to claw back some of that control and make sure that Congress really can be accountable to every dollar that's spent?
You go through the budget line by line and you put those reductions in place. And I think you start with this stuff that's been identified by the Department of Government Efficiency in the White House, and you start to pull that back line by line. There's going to be tough votes because Congress is not used to pulling money back that's already been authorized. It's time to do that, and we need to have the will to do it. 2/3 of the American public agrees with us that we need to reduce spending. And by the way, we are going to have to do it alone as Republicans because Democrats have shown they don't care about fiscal responsibility. They've given us inflation over the last 4 years. We are in this on our own, but we need to live up to the mandate that was given to us on November 5th.
Well, Congressman, you just introduced a resolution to withdraw the U.S. from the World Trade Organization over its handling of China. Tell us more, because I want to also get your take on some of these tariffs and the impact.
Yeah, so every 5 years, we get the ability as Congress to review whether we should belong to the World Trade Organization. That 5 years is up now. I introduced a resolution saying, let's have that vote. It's time to find out if members of Congress stand with America, whether they stand with Main Street, or do they stand with China and its allies? We've seen our manufacturing and farmers suffer over the last 20 years as a result of these trade agreements that have been struck. And China steals our intellectual property. They use forced labor. It's time to look out for Americans. It's time to have a vote in Congress. Who do you stand with? The American people or the World Trade Organization?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, corporate America has to start recognizing the national security threats here and not just the economic impact of these tariffs. But when you're talking about China retaliation, their tariffs are going to be stacking. They're talking about 125% baseline tariff on U.S. goods, likely stacking along with the retaliatory tariffs on agriculture, rare metal magnet and rare earth-related export controls. They've already said we're not going to send rare earth minerals to the United States. They also said we're not going to accept planes from Boeing, right? U.S. companies being put on the unreliable list and antitrust investigations. What do you make of China's retaliation toward America?
I say bring it on. It is time that we have this. It's time we have this fight, Maria. Okay. We need to have the debate. We need to decide, are we going to let China dictate to us as they have been? Yeah. Look at the last 4 years under the previous administration. They did nothing to take on China. We have to do that. And by the way, in regards to the tariffs issue, we need to make sure that we have the work requirements I identified earlier, as well as the regulatory reform. Because in order to build mills and factories, it can't take 5 to 10 years to get the permits to do it. The administration needs to really stay after this in regards to permitting reform so that we can build those mills and factories here. The American people are ready. Yeah,
I certainly think President Trump is making that a priority. Permitting legislation or permitting executive orders for sure. We got to see if Congress can codify those. But you're right on China. I mean, from surveillance balloons to bullying our ships to buying land near military installations, it never stops. Congressman, it's good to see you. Thank you, sir. Tiffany joining us.